Today we're excited to welcome Eric Drew, who is the Director of Worship for the United Methodist Church in Greater New Jersey Annual Conference. So it's a privilege to have him with us today. And Eric, start by telling us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I grew up going to Clinton UMC. Shout out to Mom and Dad who are still here. I have been a musician a lot of my life, as a trumpet player for a long time, did the music school thing. And now I got into worship really specifically after some time as a missionary in missions in Honduras. So worship for me was really where music and missions kind of collided. And I love that that's going on too.
So taking off your Director of Worship hat, you've had a lot of years of experience being a worship leader. So let's talk about leading worship for a couple minutes, right? As a worship leader, how do you get out of the rut of having to pick songs every week? What do you do to creatively help that process?
You worship yourself. Not worship yourself. You worship God by yourself first, I think. And for me, recently, that's writing my own songs. So where am I in my faith journey and how do I express that? And I think we're seeing more and more churches do that, which is kind of cool. I think it's super important for worship leaders to be exposed to a lot of music and also to be in community and relationships with other worship leaders. So when I lived in Harrisburg, there were a lot of contemporary worship leaders around us. And we'd just do lunch or coffee or, hey, what are you listening to? Or what's really resonating in your context? But I think doing community together and learning from one another is really important as we kind of do ministry every single week.
What are 2 or 3 things that every worship team should have or should do?
You have to practice every week and start with a devotional. If you're not practicing every week and you're not starting with a devotion, it's going to be really, really hard to be bringing God our best on the spiritual and the musical side of things. I think we should really articulate and get clear about who we are and who we're called to be. So what are the most important things for us? And are those core values? Is that a vision? Is that our mission? I don't know for each individual church, but I think we need to be clear about who we are and what we do and why we're doing it. And then I think we should not be afraid to step out and take risks. I'd read a book recently, In a Pit with a Lion on a Snowy Day. It's an older one by Mark Batterson, and he talks so much about faith is tied to risk-taking. And sometimes in the local church, it feels really, really hard to take a risk. But I think we all constantly need to be plugged into what are the next steps? What's the next God-sized thing that could happen here? And that's taking a risk sometimes, but I think it's really important to explore those things and step out.
What are 2 or 3 things that worship teams should stop doing?
We should stop calling songs that are 10 years old or older contemporary, because they're not anymore. We shouldn't stop singing them. They are blended. They are a tradition that we inherit now. We should stop calling them contemporary. A couple other things that worship teams should stop doing. I want to say worship teams should stop being so nice to one another. And that's not exactly what I mean. But I think if we're called to bring God our best, and we're called to be operating out of our gifts, the gifts that God has given us, then we have to be honest about evaluating if music may not be someone's gift. And so it's not that I don't think worship teams should be nice to each other. Of course, people should love each other and speak the truth in love and have grace for one another. But I think we also need to be evaluating, are we bringing God our best, and are we operating out of our gift set? And when churches aren't doing that, we need to have a conversation about it.
So you're telling me that there are worship teams out there that will turn down the microphone of a singer that is singing out of tune? Does that happen? Because it happens in every church I've ever served.
Yes, and that's not a very good way of leadership. Yeah. And there are some churches who don't turn down that mic, and that's even worse.
That's right. That's true. So how do you speak the truth in love when it comes to or how do you speak the truth in love to musicians? As I've talked before, the challenge with musicians is that so much of our music, it's very soulful. It's our voice. It's who we are as people. So you could critique someone's work or a project that they're working on, and they don't care, but it's their voice, it's their art, it's their soul, it's their heart, you know? So how do you speak the truth in love? And obviously, I know you've kind of given some answers to this with being in relationship with each other, having core values, you know, some of those things. But how do you speak the truth in love to maybe those that are so invested in their gift of music?
Yeah. So relationship is a big thing. And I have to think about that. I really care about the relationship and the person, right? I can't just approach it as they don't sound good on my worship team, so we have to have, right? I have to be really rooted in who I am, and my relationship with that person for it to really go well, I think. And eventually, you know, we also have to be just willing to have the conversation. You know, I found so many times that if we're willing to be open and honest about it, people kind of recognize. You know, if that drummer just cannot stay in time on any song anymore, he knows that too. And so if I can lovingly have a conversation, say, hey, what's going on? Hey, is everything all right? I feel like it's not clicking in. Is there something else? And eventually saying, you know, I feel like it's not clicking in. I love your heart for it. And in some conversations, I try to offer another option. So what if you served on hospitality team? You know, we really have a need in multimedia. So it's not that we don't like you. It's not that we're shutting you out. It's not that you're not good, right? We want you here still. And we're feeling like this is maybe not the best fit right now. This is maybe not your best gift right now. And you might be frustrated in the situation too.
So musicians are notoriously emotional people. So how do you lead a group of people that can be tough to lead sometimes, as whether it be in a praise team context or worship band? You know, how do you say to someone, you know, hey, you're a little bit flat or sharp on your pitch, and then they, you know, start crying, you know, or a guitarist that says, no, I'm playing it this way and not the way you want me to play. Like, how do you navigate relationships within the team of people who are called to lead worship?
Yeah, I'm convinced that you start with a very strong set of core values. So these are the things we are all about. These are the reasons we're having these conversations. These are the reasons we get together. So worship is all about God, right? And every community is going to express their core values differently. But worship is about God. We're not here to just be performers. We're worshiping God, right? Another core value that a lot of people talk about is excellence, or some kind of expression of we're giving God our best. You know, it's a team, we're a family, we work together. I think care for one another and being loving and caring and grace-filled with one another is a core value. A lot of teams come around, and each church can do kind of what are the most important things to us differently, right? But I think if you express what are the most important things to us, and you can get people on the same page about what those are, right? We're all about God and community and loving one another and bringing our best. Those are things that people can come together around. Then when you have to have a hard conversation like, hey, Mikey, every week when you're playing that guitar line, your top note is flat. Can you bring it up a little bit? Or whatever the conversation is in traditional or contemporary worship. You know, remember, the most important thing to us is bringing God our best. It just feels and sounds like this isn't our best. You know, and we've all agreed to come around these values. And I think that empowers us to have some of those harder conversations.
So you've thrown out the phrase excellence in worship. That's a phrase we often talk about. What does excellence in worship mean to you? What does it look like?
Yeah, I think it's giving God our best. And that's going to depend and be different on the situation and in the context. So I think when I think about excellence, I think it's really important that we define what excellence is. Right? So excellence sometimes is a perfect performance if they're a pro. Excellence can also be a 12-year-old child participating in worship by singing a solo, depending on where you are and how the community is. But I think overriding all that is bringing our best. What is the best that we can bring God in response to God's goodness and grace and work in our lives?
So often when we think of excellence in worship, we think of from like a technical or musicianship type of reality. But what you've talked about, not only in terms of excellence there, but excellence is part of the heart of the worship leader. Mm-hmm. So how do we cultivate excellence of heart in worship leaders?
Yeah, we remember why we're doing it. And that's really easy, especially if you're leading kind of from week to week, to stay plugged into why we're doing this, right? How can I keep as a worship leader, how can I keep my own spirituality and journey with God and relationship, real and relevant and moving forward, right? And for me, doing missions or outreach or something, the service part I think is really important to me. But how are we continually journeying ourselves as worship leaders spiritually and growing and moving forward? And I think that helps to really root us and center us in.
So what's your favorite, let's say, worship song to listen to? What is your favorite worship song to lead?
So recently I love listening to, I have two. One is Come Away, which is Jesus Culture, and that guitar riff at the intro, the sound is just like so good, like brings you right in. It's also very worshipful. Come Away, and then I'm really into Death Was Arrested, which is North Point, because just really deep theology for contemporary worship song. What do I love to lead? I love to lead anything that sounds really new that people know. So in lots of cases, that's Our God. Everyone knows a guitar lick, everyone will sing along. It's great to teach everyone a new chorus, and so I try to do a lot of that too, but try to find those anchors that, kind of wherever we're going, sound really recent, but also people can sing along with.
One of the things, as you mentioned with the North Point Death Was Arrested song, is you liked it because of its theology. And I don't think a lot of people say, oh, contemporary worship, theology, right? Well, that's one of the critiques of it. It's that, well, hymnody has the theology, contemporary music is about the engagement. And so sometimes we've seen early on in the contemporary movement, the purpose was not communicating theology, it was about engaging people. Yeah. So it was about singing a line over and over and over. And the critique was, we're tired of singing the same line over and over and over again. Yeah. Though it was easy to pick it up if it's an easy melody and it's the same words over and over again. But there's been a bit of a pendulum swing in some ways recently, I think, between how do we not let it be just about the music, but about the text of the music. How do they go hand in hand, and how do they communicate the message, and what is that message? Is it about teaching theology? Is it about engaging people in worship? Is it a call to praise? Or is it a call to, something else, right?
Yeah, so something I'm really hopeful for, and I think is starting to catch on, in addition to kind of going deeper with theology than yes, Lord, yes, Lord, yes, yes, Lord, which I'm sick of singing too, is a rediscovery of hymn texts, and so making hymn texts sound current, but also kind of a rediscovery of the liturgy in the best sense of liturgy, right? So not liturgy in that it's that boring old thing that we used to do we don't really need anymore. Liturgy means work of the people, right? And so every service has some kind of liturgy, some order of hopefully what the people are doing, unless they're sitting on pews like logs, right? But I think in addition to deeper theology, a lot of worship songwriters and planners are finding ways to express liturgy and the movement of liturgy, even in contemporary songs or service planning. So, like an opening worship song, "Here for You," God, we've come here into this place. Super contemporary sounding. It also is kind of teaching. It's an opening a worship song, and then walking through confession and pardon, remembrance of grace. And invocation and prayer. So I think worship songwriters and worship planners are starting to rediscover that kind of ancient liturgy that can really add meaningful depth in addition to the theology of words. And then I think the other thing that I'm seeing a lot, especially around greater New Jersey, is for a long time we went through this, it's either traditional or it's contemporary, right? And contemporary means anything that doesn't have an organ. Right? And I think we're seeing a lot more kind of indigenous sounds, whether that's bluegrass or indie or folk or something more rocking or something more techno-y, kind of an EDM in worship music, which has started to seep in. But I think contemporary expressions of worship are starting to feel more indigenous to that community where they're happening. And I love that that's going on too.
Was there ever a time in your ministry where worship transformed you, in a unique way?
Yeah, I think so much about my first year in missions and in Central America, and that just completely recalibrated what I even thought about worship. I had always gone to the church and played the trumpet, and it was a lot about performing. And watching kids worship on this countryside just was mind-blowing. And then I think about change, and worship changes us. When we encounter God, we leave differently. And I think we have to leave differently than when we came in. So can I think of an experience recently? Recently, I visit a lot of churches for work, and some churches do that, and I leave kind of feeling changed. And it's a different moment everywhere. But for me, it's music, and being the musician and thinking technically about things, I'm distracted if things aren't really good or if there are a lot of mistakes. So that kind of takes me out of it. That's part of where excellence fits in too, right? If it's not excellent, it could be really distracting. So anything that kind of takes me out of like comfort zone, and I love singing.
So, for the guy or gal that has a guitar around their neck, or they're sitting behind the keyboard, or they're standing up with a microphone, and they're just trying to make it work in their local church, may not have a full band, right? Or they may not have all the best gifts and talents like other professional musicians. What are just a couple things that you could say to encourage them in their ministry?
God has given you everything you need with which to worship God. God has given you the instruments and enough chords and the voice and enough songs to get started. And worship is giving all of ourselves to praise God, to lift God high. And that changes us and that changes the people around us. So if it is difficult, if it is frustrating, if it is tiring, if it is challenging, it will always be. But you're doing one of the most important things in the whole entire world that all of us were created to do. Hang in there. It's going to be all right. It's going to be better than all right. God has an amazing, incredible, huge plan. Keep praying about it. Keep wrestling through what that means to be a worship leader, to be a worshiper, to live following Jesus. Stay plugged in. Find someone to help. Reach out to a mentor, a friend, someone in your congregation, someone that you know, to be encouraging to you. I think I have a couple people in my life that were super encouraging that I would have quit if they hadn't kind of led me forward. Hang in there and know that you are loved and created to do what you're doing. Keep doing it.
So thanks for listening, watching. Hopefully this has been encouraging to you in your music ministry or worship life of a church. So if you want Eric to come and to speak with you or to encourage you, that's part of his ministry and his job. Eric, what are some ways that people can get in contact with you?
Yeah, so I'm on the Greater New Jersey website. That's really easy. gnjumc.org. Search for Eric Drew. My email address is edrew@gnjumc.org, and I'd love to connect with kind of as many people as possible. I think it's the coolest thing ever that I get to connect with pastors and worship leaders and lay people in churches. So I would love to connect.
I know you write on the blog for the conference website. You also, do you do your own blog too?
Yeah, I have a website where I'm a contributor now. I passed off some of that. It's Basileia Movement, which is not very good for marketing. but it's a really cool word. It's BASILEIA movement, MOVEMENT.com. And myself and several other pastors write there about worship and all other things local church.
Okay. Cool. All right, reach out to Eric and reach out to us if you need anything. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks
Bye.
so much.
Thanks. Yeah, sweet. Appreciate it.